The last rays of sunset painted the Arizona Territory in gold when 8-year-old Running Fox approached the lone settler at the trading post. Eyes wide with hope and sorrow beyond his years, the boy's request was simple yet profound. "Please marry with my mama, sir. We are so lonely." Thomas Miller, a widower who journeyed west to escape his own ghosts, felt something stir within him, a feeling he thought had died alongside his wife 3 winters past. In the distance, the silhouette of an Apache woman watched from the shadow of a juniper tree, her posture proud despite the grief that had carved hollows beneath her cheekbones. Could a man with nothing left to lose find the courage to build a bridge between 2 worlds? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Thomas Miller ran a weathered hand along the spine of his trading post ledger, the pages yellowed with time and sparse with transactions. 3 years in this desolate stretch of Arizona Territory, and some days he still wondered what compelled him to remain. The trading post stood at the crossroads of 2 worlds, not quite in settler territory, not fully in Apache land, much like Thomas himself, who no longer felt he belonged anywhere. In the quiet evening hours after the boy's visit, Thomas found himself staring at the silver case he kept tucked beneath the counter. Inside was a faded daguerreotype, the only image he possessed of Caroline. He rarely allowed himself to look at it, but tonight, something about that Apache boy's plea had unsettled the careful walls he'd built around his memories. "Caroline," he whispered, tracing her delicate features with his fingertip. Even captured. In the stillness of the photograph, her eyes held the spark of humor that had first drawn him to her in that Boston schoolhouse where they both taught. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, as was proper for a teacher, but he remembered how it would fall in waves across their pillows at night. Tuberculosis had taken her slowly, cruelly. Thomas had watched helplessly as she withered, her brilliant mind intact while her body betrayed her. "Go west," she had told him in her final weeks, her voice thin as paper. "Find purpose again. Promise me you won't let yourself wither away too." He had made that promise, though he never truly intended to keep it. The journey west was meant to be an extended funeral procession, a gradual surrender to his own grief. Yet something in the vast skies and rugged landscapes had kept him moving, kept him breathing. The trading post had been an impulse purchase, a ramshackle building abandoned by a settler who'd lost his nerve after skirmishes with the Apache. Thomas had paid too much for it, but money held little meaning to him then. He'd learned quickly that survival in the territory demanded vigilance and adaptation. The Apache approached cautiously at first, expecting the same hostility they'd received from most white men. But Thomas treated them with the same quiet respect he showed everyone, neither seeking friendship nor creating enemies. He poured himself a finger of whiskey, his nightly ritual, and stepped onto the porch. The vast expanse of stars overhead never failed to humble him. In Boston, buildings and fog obscured such celestial displays. Here, the heavens demanded attention, made a man feel both insignificant and connected to something greater than himself. The boy's words echoed in his mind. "Please marry with my mama. Sir... we are so lonely." Thomas recognized loneliness. It had been his constant companion. But he'd never considered it might be something shared, something that could be eased by reaching across the divide that separated him from others. He had seen the Apache woman before. Morning Star, they called her. She came to trade occasionally, her son usually trailing close behind. She spoke better English than most, and there was a dignity in her, bearing that commanded respect. Thomas had noted her beauty in the detached way he observed all things now acknowledging it, without allowing himself to feel its impact. But her son's unexpected request forced him to see her differently, not just as an Apache woman, not merely as a curiosity in his isolated existence, but as someone who might share his experience of loss. The boy had mentioned his father was gone. What had happened to the man? And what courage had it taken for this child to approach a white stranger with such a request? Thomas finished his whiskey and glanced toward the cluster of Apache dwellings barely visible in the distance. What would Caroline think of this situation? He could almost hear her practical voice. "Well, Thomas, are you living or merely existing out here?" He hadn't truly lived since she died. A trading post, the occasional conversations with travelers, the careful neutrality he maintained between settlers and natives. These weren't living. These were marking time. Thomas returned inside and carefully replaced the daguerreotype in its case. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would pay a visit to the Apache woman and her son. Not with any promise or expectation, but with the simple acknowledgement that perhaps loneliness was a burden better shared than carried alone. As he prepared for bed, Thomas realized he was nervous about the prospect, like a schoolboy before. His first dance. The feeling was so foreign, so long absent from his life, that he almost welcomed it. Caroline had always said that fear and anticipation were close cousins. Both signaled that something mattered. And for the first time in 3 years, Thomas Miller allowed himself to consider that something might matter again. Morning Star awoke before dawn, as was her custom. The small adobe dwelling was quiet save for the soft breathing of her son. Running Fox curled beneath a woven blanket in the corner. She moved silently, practiced in the art of preserving these peaceful moments before the day's demands began. Outside, she greeted the morning with a prayer, her hands raised to the lightning sky. 2 years had passed since Swift Hawk had gone to the spirit world, yet she still found herself turning to share observations with a husband no longer there. The Apache did not speak the names of the dead, but her heart whispered his name in the quiet moments. From a small shelf of precious things, Morning Star took down a beaded medicine pouch. Swift Hawk had made it for her when they first married, the intricate patterns telling the story of their people and their bond. Inside were sacred herbs, sage, cedar, sweetgrass that she used in her healing work, but also to remember. The scent of the herbs brought him back to her, if only for a moment. "Mama?" Running Fox stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep. At 8 years old, he had his father's keen eyes and quick mind. "You should still be sleeping, little one," she said, quickly returning the pouch to its place. "I had a dream." "About father," the boy said, coming to sit beside her. He was riding his spotted pony across the sky. Morning Star smoothed his hair. "A good dream. He watches over us. But he cannot help us with the wood or the hunting, or make you smile." The boy's directness, so like his father's, could still catch her off guard. Their life had shifted dramatically after Swift Hawk's death in a skirmish with soldiers. Though Morning Star was respected as a skilled healer and basket weaver, and though the tribe cared for widows and children as their own, there was an isolation to their grief that set them apart. Running Fox had grown too serious too quickly, taking on responsibilities beyond his years. "We have enough," she assured him, though in truth the coming winter concerned her. "The people help us. But we are still lonely," Running Fox insisted with the simple clarity of childhood. Morning Star could not deny this truth. Loneliness was their constant companion, even surrounded by the tribe. Swift Hawk had been her childhood friend, her partner in all things. Without him, she navigated the world unbalanced, like an eagle with one wing. "The white trader man is alone too," Running Fox observed, watching her carefully. "The one with the kind eyes who gave me a piece of candy." Morning Star frowned. Thomas Miller, the trader who had established himself at the old post near their territory. She had dealt with him a few times, finding him fair and less quick to judgment than most white men. Still, She discouraged Running Fox from spending time near the trading post. "He has his own people," she said, rising to prepare their morning meal. "No," Running Fox shook his head firmly. "He told me his wife walks with the spirits now, like Father, and no children wait for him. His eyes are sad like yours." Morning Star paused in her work, surprised by her son's perception. "When did you speak with him?" The boy suddenly became very interested in a loose thread on his blanket. "Sometimes I watch the trading post when I should be gathering wood," he admitted. "Yesterday he saw me and called me over. He speaks a few words of our language." This was news to Morning Star. Most settlers made no effort to learn the Apache tongue, considering it beneath them. "He asked about my name, and I told him how. Father named me for the fox we saw running on the day I was born." The boy smiled at the memory. He understood. "He said names should carry meaning." Morning Star felt a flicker of curiosity about this unusual white man, quickly suppressed. Curiosity about settlers rarely led to good outcomes for her people. Later that morning, as she worked on a basket commissioned by a traveling merchant, Morning Star sensed her son's restlessness. He had been unusually quiet since their morning conversation. "What troubles you, my son?" she finally asked. Running Fox looked up from the small wooden eagle he was holding, a carving his father had made for him. "Father told me before he went to the spirit world that I must care for you," he said solemnly. "But I am just a boy. I cannot make the loneliness go away." Morning Star set aside her basket and drew him close. "That is not your burden to carry. But I had an idea," he continued, pulling back to look at her earnestly. "What if the trader man could help us? He needs someone too." Running Fox. Morning Star was rarely stern with her son, but this suggestion crossed a boundary. "The white man's world and ours are separate. They do not wish to mix with us except for trade. He is different," the boy insisted. "I can tell." Morning Star shook her head. "We do not need a white man's help or pity." Running Fox fell silent, but there was a determined set to his jaw that reminded her painfully of Swift Hawk. She should have recognized the warning signs of a plan forming in his young mind. That afternoon, when Running Fox asked to take some of her finished baskets to the traveling merchant, she agreed, thinking the errand would settle him. Only later would she realize her son had never intended to visit the merchant at all. Thomas spent the morning in a state of uncharacteristic indecision. The practical part of his mind, the part that had kept him functioning these past years, listed all the reasons to dismiss the boy's request as childish fantasy. Marriages between settlers and natives were rare, viewed with suspicion by both communities. He knew almost nothing about the woman beyond her dignified bearing and the careful way she conducted her trades. And what did he have to offer anyone? A solitary man running a modest trading post on the edge of nowhere, yet something about running. Fox's earnest plea had penetrated the careful numbness Thomas had cultivated. The boy's words, "We are so lonely," echoed his own unspoken truth. By midday, Thomas had made his decision. He closed the trading post early, something he'd done only during the worst sandstorms, and changed into his least worn shirt. He hesitated before the small mirror, noting the gray threading through his brown hair and the weathered lines around his eyes. At 42, he looked older, worn down by grief and the harsh desert elements. "This is foolishness," he muttered to his reflection. But he continued his preparations nonetheless. The walk to the Apache encampment took nearly an hour. Thomas had been there only once before, when invited to a trading council the previous year. He carried no goods today, only a small bundle containing cornmeal and coffee-humble offerings that wouldn't appear presumptuous as he approached the cluster of dwellings. Thomas felt the weight of curious stares. Children paused in their play, women looked up from their work, and men assessed him with guarded expressions. He recognized several faces from trading interactions, but felt acutely aware of his outsider status. A familiar small figure darted toward him. Running Fox's face lit with surprise and delight. "You came," the boy exclaimed, switching to English. "You really came." Thomas managed to smile, suddenly unsure of his reception. "I thought we might speak with your mother properly," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "Is she here?" Running Fox nodded eagerly, then reached into his pocket and proudly displayed a small wooden carving of an eagle in flight, its wings outstretched and details remarkably precise for such a small piece. "My father made this," he explained. "He was Eagle Clan. He could carve anything." Thomas admired the craftsmanship with genuine appreciation. "Your father was very skilled. This is beautiful work." "He made it so I would remember to be brave," the boy continued. "Eagles see everything and fear nothing." He hesitated, then pressed the carving into Thomas's hand. "You can hold it if you want." Thomas understood the significance of this gesture. The boy was sharing something precious, a connection to his father. Before he could respond, a woman's voice called out sharply in Apache. Morningstar stood several yards away, her expression a mixture of confusion and dismay. She said something to Running Fox in their language, her tone questioning but firm. The boy answered rapidly, gesturing toward Thomas with evident excitement. Morningstar's gaze shifted to Thomas, her dark eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. Thomas handed the eagle, carving back to Running Fox, and stepped forward, removing his hat respectfully. "Mrs.," he began, then realized he didn't know how to address her properly. "Morningstar," he amended, pronouncing her name carefully. "I hope my visit isn't unwelcome. Your son came to see me yesterday, and I thought we should speak." Her posture remained rigid, but she switched to English, her accent slight but melodious. "My son should not have bothered you, Mr. Miller. He sometimes forgets his place." "He was no bother," Thomas assured her. "And please, call me Thomas." Running Fox tugged at his mother's skirt. "I told him about father," he said in English, clearly wanting Thomas to understand. "I told him we are lonely." A flash of embarrassment crossed Morningstar's face, followed by something that might have been anger. She spoke rapidly to her son in Apache, and the boy's shoulders slumped. "I meant no disrespect," Thomas said quickly. "I know how it is to lose someone dear. My wife, Carolyn, passed 3 years ago." Morningstar's expression softened slightly. Loss was a language they both understood, transcending the barriers between their worlds. After a moment's consideration, she inclined her head toward her dwelling. "You may come and sit," she said, her tone careful but not unkind. "We will speak." The inside of the adobe structure was cool and neat, with woven mats on the earthen floor and baskets of varying sizes arranged along one wall. Thomas sat where indicated, acutely aware of curious neighbors watching from a distance. Running Fox settled between them, beaming with satisfaction at having successfully brought these two lonely adults together. He placed his wooden eagle on a small shelf of treasured items, alongside several smooth stones and a beaded pouch. "My son is young," Morningstar began, her hands folded in her lap. "He does not understand the ways of your people, or even fully the ways of our own. When he spoke to you." She paused, clearly choosing her words carefully. "It was a child's wish, not to be taken seriously." Thomas nodded. "I understand. But sometimes children see clearly what adults have complicated." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Perhaps, but our worlds do not easily join." "No," Thomas agreed. "They don't. But we could share a meal and conversation as neighbors. Nothing more needs to be decided today." The tension in Morningstar's shoulders eased slightly. Outside, the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the settlement. From somewhere nearby came the aroma of stew cooking over an open fire. "We will eat soon," she said finally. "You may stay if you wish." It was a small invitation, tentatively offered. But to Thomas, who had shared meals with no one but occasional travelers for 3 years, it felt momentous, a first step across a divide he'd never expected to bridge. That first shared meal marked the beginning of a cautious routine. Thomas found himself closing the trading post early one afternoon each week to visit Morning Star and Running Fox. Each time, he brought small gifts, practical things like coffee, sugar, a sturdy cooking pot, or occasionally a ribbon or small toy for the boy. The Apache community watched this developing connection, with reactions ranging from curiosity to disapproval. Thomas would feel their eyes tracking his approach, hear the murmurs that fell silent as he passed. But each week, the stares grew less pointed, the whispers less concerned. His consistency had begun to earn, if not acceptance, at least a measure of tolerance. "You read this whole book?" Running Fox asked, turning the worn copy of Robinson Crusoe over in his hands. They sat outside Morning Star's dwelling, enjoying the late afternoon shade. "Many times," Thomas replied. "It was my favorite as a boy." "What's it about?" The child ran his fingers over the embossed title, fascinated by the object. "A man who survives alone on an island for many years," Thomas explained. "He learns to build a home, find food, and eventually meets a friend from a different tribe." Running Fox looked up with sudden interest. "Like you?" Thomas smiled. "Perhaps a little, though I've been fortunate enough to meet 2 friends, not just one." The boy beamed at being called a friend. "Will you read it to me?" "If your mother approves." Thomas glanced toward where Morning Star worked nearby, weaving a basket with nimble fingers. She had been listening, as she always did, quiet but attentive. "What is this story teaching?" she asked, her English improving with each of their meetings. "Survival," Thomas answered. "Perseverance. And how people from different worlds can understand each other, given time and patience." Morning Star nodded, returning to her weaving. "These are good lessons." Thus began their reading sessions. Thomas would read a few pages, explaining unfamiliar words, while Running Fox listened with rapt attention. Sometimes Morning Star would pause in her work to listen as well, though she pretended merely to rest her hands. "Man Friday," Running Fox repeated one day, trying out the new vocabulary. "That's a strange name." "It's not his real name," Thomas explained. "Crusoe called him that because he found him on a Friday. His true name, in his own language, would have been different. Like how soldiers call me Boy instead of Running Fox." The child asked innocently. Thomas felt a pang at the simple truth in the question. "Yes," he admitted. "It's wrong when people don't trouble themselves to learn each other's true names." Morning Star looked up, surprise flicking across her features at his candor. Their eyes met briefly before she returned to her work, but something had shifted in that moment, a small seed of trust taking root. The weeks passed, summer heat giving way to the milder days of early autumn. Thomas expanded his lessons with Running Fox to include simple writing and mathematics. The boy proved a quick study, absorbing knowledge with an eagerness that reminded Thomas of his teaching days in Boston. "Tekoji," Running Fox said one afternoon, pointing to a hawk circling overhead. "Ta-kosh," Thomas repeated, stumbling over the pronunciation. Morning Star laughed, a sound so unexpected that both Thomas and Running Fox turned to her in surprise. It was a warm sound, like water flowing over stones, and Thomas realized he had never heard it before. "Not ta-ha-ka-ji," she corrected, emphasizing differently. "Ta-ko-ji." She demonstrated again, amusement dancing in her eyes. Thomas tried again, exaggerating his effort, and was rewarded with another laugh. Running Fox joined in, and for a moment, the 3 of them shared something that felt remarkably like joy. After that day, Morning Star began teaching Thomas words in Apache names of animals, plants, and simple phrases. He learned quickly, but would sometimes deliberately mispronounce words to hear her laugh again. Not everyone approved of these developing bonds. Thomas noticed certain customers at the trading post became cooler, some avoiding his establishment altogether. Once, he overheard a passing cavalry officer remark to his companion, "Miller's going native out here. Shame to see a white man fall so low." Similarly, Morning Star faced disapproval from some tribal elders. White Hawk, the oldest of the council, warned her, "The white man's friendship is like spring rain. It seems welcome until it washes away your foundation." Yet they continued their weekly meetings, each drawn by something they had been missing. For Running Fox, it was the father figure he desperately needed. For Morning Star, it was adult conversation and shared understanding of loss. And for Thomas, it was the gradual reawakening of emotions he had thought forever buried with Caroline. One evening, as Thomas prepared to leave, Running Fox presented him with a small gift, a bracelet of woven grasses. "I made it myself," the boy said proudly. "Now you wear something Apache." Thomas slipped it onto his wrist solemnly. "I'm honored." As he walked back to his trading post in the gathering dusk, Thomas realized he felt more alive than he had in years. The grief that had been his constant companion still lingered, but alongside it grew something new, a sense of purpose, of connection. Caroline would have approved, he thought. She had always believed in bridges rather than walls between people. And somewhere in these weekly visits, in shared meals and stories and stumbling language lessons, unlikely seeds of trust had taken root and begun to grow. The autumn brought unexpected rains to the territory, turning dry creek beds into rushing torrents overnight. Thomas spent a miserable day securing his trading post against leaks, working in the downpour until he was soaked to the skin. By evening, a chill had settled deep in his bones, and he huddled near his small stove. Unable to get warm. Morning came with a pounding headache and a throat that felt lined with sand. Thomas tried to rise, but found the room spinning around him. He managed to stumble to the door and hang the closed sign before collapsing back onto his cot. Fever dreams held him in their grip, visions of Caroline, calling him from across a vast desert, Apache warriors circling on horseback, Running Fox, standing alone on a high cliff. Time lost meaning as he drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of thirst and the fire burning through his veins. A cool hand on his forehead finally broke through the haze. Thomas opened his eyes to find Morning Star bending over him, her face etched with concern. "You are very sick," she said simply. Thomas tried to speak, but could only manage a dry croak. She held a cup of water to his lips, supporting his head. As he drank, the simple kindness brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "Running Fox came for trading," she explained. "Found you like this." Thomas glanced around and saw the boy watching anxiously from the doorway. How many days had passed? He couldn't be sure. "I'm sorry," he whispered, though he wasn't entirely certain what he was apologizing for, perhaps for being seen in such a weakened state. "No sorry," Morning Star replied firmly. "We help now." She unwrapped a small bundle she had brought, revealing a rare plant with distinctive purple-veined leaves. Thomas recognized it vaguely. He had seen it growing in only one place, a hidden canyon several miles from the trading post. "Snake root," she explained, crushing the leaves between her fingers. "Very powerful, very rare." Thomas watched as she mixed the crushed leaves with water in a small clay bowl, her movements precise and practiced. "You are a healer," he realized. Aloud, a ghost of a smile touched her lips. "For my people, yes. Why help me?" The question slipped out before he could consider its implications. Morning Star paused in her work, meeting his gaze directly. "Running Fox asks," and double quotes, she hesitated, "you show respect. Not like other white men." The simple honesty of her answer humbled him. The bitter medicine burned his throat, but Thomas drank it without complaint. Morning Star instructed Running. Fox to gather more wood for the stove, while she set about creating order in Thomas's sparse living quarters. Too weak to protest, Thomas drifted back to sleep to the sound of her quiet movements. He woke later to find Running Fox sitting beside him, solemnly changing the cool cloth on his forehead, as he had obviously been instructed to do. "Your mother?" Thomas asked, his voice slightly stronger. "Getting water," the boy replied. "She says the fever burns it from you." Thomas noticed the boy clutching something in his free hand, the wooden eagle carving. "Your father's eagle," he observed. Running Fox nodded. "It will help protect you. Eagles are powerful medicine." Touched by the child's concern, Thomas managed a weak smile. "Thank you." When Morning Star returned, she brought not only water, but a pot of rich stew that filled the trading post with tantalizing aromas. Thomas found himself suddenly ravenous. Another good sign. As darkness fell, Thomas expected them to leave, but instead, Morning Star arranged blankets near the stove. "Night is dangerous time for fever," she explained. "We stay." The implications of an Apache woman and her son spending the night at a white man's trading post weren't lost on Thomas. "Your people won't approve," he warned. Morning Star's expression remained resolute. "I am healer first," she said simply. But there was something more in her eyes, a decision made, a boundary crossed. Through the night, Thomas woke several times to find her there, tending the fire, offering water or medicine. Once, in the shadowy hours before dawn, he caught her watching him with an expression of such tender concern that it stirred something long dormant within him. "Your husband?" he asked quietly. "Was he a good man?" She seemed surprised by the question, but answered without hesitation. "The best of men. Brave, kind to me, loving to our son." "You must miss him terribly." Her gaze dropped to her hands. "Each day. But he told me, before the last battle," she paused, searching for the English words. "He said I must find joy again. For our son, for myself." Thomas understood then that Swift Hawk had known he might not return, and had tried to release her from eternal grief. It was the same gift Carolyn had tried to give him. "And have you found joy?" he asked. Morning Star considered the question. Small moments, Running Fox's laugh, the sunrise, and ... She hesitated, then finished softly, "Teaching you our words." By morning, Thomas's fever had broken. He sat up, weak but clear-headed, and accepted the tea Morning Star pressed into his hands. "The plant you used," he said, "it's rare and valuable. Why would you use it for me?" Morning Star busied herself gathering her things. "All life has value," she replied. But then, almost too quietly to hear, she added, "Some more than others." As they prepared to leave, Thomas caught her hand impulsively. "Thank you," he said, putting all his sincerity into the simple words. Her fingers tightened briefly around his before withdrawing. "Rest today," she instructed. "Drink water. We will return tomorrow." And in that promise, "We will return," Thomas recognized the seed of trust between them had grown into something stronger, something neither of them had yet dared to name. The cavalry patrol arrived at the trading post on a crisp November morning. Thomas was restocking shelves when the jingle of tack and the thud of hooves announced their presence. 6 mounted soldiers, their blue uniforms dusty from the trail, dismounted outside. Their leader entered first, a tall man with a meticulously trimmed mustache and cold blue eyes. The insignia on his uniform marked him as a captain. He surveyed the trading post with undisguised contempt before settling his gaze on Thomas. "You Miller?" he asked, not bothering with a greeting. Thomas nodded, instantly wary. "I am. How can I help you, Captain?" "Harrington, James Harrington, 4th Cavalry." He removed his gloves with deliberate precision. "Recently assigned to maintain order in this sector." Thomas noticed the military orders document, partially visible in Harrington's breast pocket, official looking. Paper with a territorial seal. "Welcome to the territory," he offered neutrally. Harrington made a dismissive gesture. "I've heard some concerning reports about this establishment, Miller. Thought I should investigate personally." "Reports?" Thomas kept his voice even. "Fraternization with hostiles. Specifically, allowing Apache to freely enter and exit this trading post, even entertaining them in your private quarters." Harrington's eyes narrowed. "Care to explain?" Thomas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "There's no law against trading with the local tribes, Captain. And they're not hostiles. There's been peace in this area for over a year." "Peace," Harrington scoffed. "A temporary condition at best. These savages understand only one thing: force." He picked up a beaded pouch similar to Morning Star's medicine bag that Thomas had begun stocking for travelers interested in native crafts. "Becoming quite the Indian lover, aren't you, Miller?" The other soldiers had spread throughout the trading post, examining goods with rough hands and exchanging knowing glances. One knocked over a carefully arranged display of canned goods. "Careful with those," Thomas said sharply. "Oops," the soldier smirked. Making no move to write, the fallen cans. Harrington placed the pouch down and leaned across the counter. "Let me be clear, Miller. The territorial governor has authorized increased military presence to protect settlers and prepare for progress. Railroads coming through, new towns being established. The old ways are ending." He tapped the document in his pocket. "Got the orders right here. Part of that progress means the Apache will be relocated to a proper reservation, where they belong. Anyone who impedes that process will be considered." He paused meaningfully. "Unpatriotic." Thomas met his gaze steadily. "I'm just a trader, Captain. I take no political positions." "Every action is political out here," Harrington countered, "including who you choose to befriend or more." The insinuation hung in the air between them. One of the soldiers sniggered. "I've heard rumors about you and that Apache widow," Harrington continued, watching for Thomas's reaction. "Mourning something or other. Pretty thing for a savage." Thomas's hands clenched beneath the counter, but he kept his expression neutral. "Rumors are just that, Captain. Rumors, perhaps." Harrington straightened. "But appearances matter in civilization, Miller. A white man going native, it upsets the natural order. Makes other Indians think they can rise above their station." Before Thomas could respond, the trading post door opened. Running Fox stood in the doorway, a small basket of herbs in his hands, clearly sent by his mother to check on Thomas's recovery. Boy froze at the sight of the soldiers, his young face instantly masking any emotion a survival skill Apache children learned early. "Well now," Harrington drawled, speaking of appearances. Thomas moved quickly from behind the counter, positioning himself between the captain and the child. "He's just delivering medicines. I've been ill." Running Fox, sensing the tension, began backing toward the door, but one of the soldiers had already moved to block his exit. "Medicine, is it?" Harrington approached, towering over the boy. "Or messages? Perhaps your Apache friends are planning something we should know about." "He's 8 years old," Thomas said, struggling to keep his voice level. "Hardly a threat to territorial security." Running Fox darted a glance at Thomas, fear evident despite his brave attempt to hide it. "It's all right," Thomas assured him in Apache, using one of the phrases Morning Star had taught him. The boy's eyes widened slightly at hearing his language from Thomas's mouth. Harrington's expression hardened. "Using their savage tongue now, Miller? How far you've fallen." He turned to the soldier blocking the door. "Corporal, escort this young brave back to his people. Inform them that unauthorized visits to white establishments are discouraged." "He goes nowhere without my permission," Thomas said, his voice quiet but firm. "This is my trading post, on land deeded to me by the territorial authority. You have no jurisdiction here without cause." For a tense moment, Harrington's hand hovered near his sidearm. Then he smiled a cold, calculating expression. Jurisdiction is a fluid concept in these parts, Miller. Remember that. He nodded, too. His men. We've seen enough for now. The soldiers filed out, but Harrington lingered at the doorway. Consider your associations carefully, Miller. When the time comes to draw lines, make sure you're on the right side of them. His gaze shifted to Running Fox. And keep your little savage friend away from my men. Some aren't as restrained as I am. After they departed, Thomas knelt before the visibly shaken boy. Are you all right? Running Fox nodded, though his hands trembled slightly. Bad men, he whispered. Yes, Thomas agreed grimly. Bad men. He took the basket of healing herbs from the boy's hands. Thank your mother for these. But it's not safe for you to come alone anymore. I'll visit your camp tomorrow instead. As he watched Running Fox hurry back toward the Apache settlement, Thomas felt a knot of dread forming in his stomach. Harrington represented a threat beyond mere disapproval. The military orders he'd glimpsed likely detailed plans that would upend the fragile peace of the region, and any future Thomas might hope to build here. The question now was whether to retreat from the connection he'd formed with Morning Star and her son, or to stand firm against the coming storm. And for the first time in years, Thomas realized his decision mattered deeply, not just to himself, but to others who had somehow become precious to him. Thomas visited the Apache settlement the next day as promised, warning Morning Star about Harrington's veiled threats. She received the news with quiet dignity, though concern shadowed her eyes when he mentioned the captain's interest in her specifically. This man has power, she observed, power to hurt. Yes, Thomas acknowledged, but I won't let him intimidate me into abandoning our friendship. Morning Star studied him, seeming to weigh something in her mind. Friendship, she repeated softly, as though testing the adequacy of the word. In the weeks that followed, Thomas adjusted their routine. Instead of Morning Star and Running Fox visiting the trading post, he would close early one afternoon to visit them, taking a circuitous route to avoid being tracked by Harrington's men. It was a precaution that felt both necessary and absurd. 2. Adults and a child forced to hide their innocent association. One December afternoon, Thomas noticed the telltale signs of an approaching storm, the unnatural stillness, the strange copper light on the horizon. Such storms could arrive with shocking speed and violence in the territory. He hurried to secure the trading post, then hesitated. He had planned to visit Morning Star and Running Fox that day. The sensible choice would be to remain safely in his own quarters, but something pulled him toward their settlement, perhaps concern for their safety, perhaps simply the desire for companionship as the world howled outside. Before he could reconsider, Thomas gathered a few supplies and set out, hoping to outpace the approaching tempest. He was halfway there when the storm overtook him. The wind rose from whisper to roar in minutes, carrying stinging particles of sand and debris. The sky darkened to an ominous bruised purple, and lightning split the horizon. Thomas pulled his bandana over his mouth and nose, pressing forward with bowed head. By the time he reached the Apache settlement, the storm had escalated to full fury. Most dwellings were battened down, their occupants safely inside. Thomas staggered to Morning Star's door, barely able to see through the swirling dust. Her shock at his appearance was evident, but she quickly pulled him inside, securing the door against the howling wind. The small adobe dwelling was snug and warm, lit by a central fire that cast dancing shadows on the walls. You should not travel in such weather, she scolded, helping him remove his dust-covered coat. Very dangerous. I was worried about you and Running Fox, he admitted, somewhat sheepishly now that he saw them safe and prepared for the storm. Running Fox, who had been securing blankets over the small window, grinned at him. Apache know about storms, he said proudly. We are ready always. "So I see," Thomas smiled, grateful for the boy's simple acceptance of his presence. Morning Star handed him a handmade clay cup filled with water. "Drink," she instructed. "Dust dries the throat." Thomas accepted the cup, noticing the intricate pattern etched around its rim, a row of small triangles representing mountains. Morning Star explained when he asked. He drank deeply, the cool water washing away the grit of his journey. Outside, the storm intensified. Wind battered the sturdy adobe walls, and sand hissed against the windows like thousands of tiny snakes. Thomas realized he would not be able to return to the trading post until morning. "I should find somewhere else to wait out the storm," he sighed, suddenly conscious of the impropriety of remaining in her home overnight. Morning Star shook her head firmly. "No one travels now. You stay," she gestured to the fire. "We have food, warmth." As the evening progressed, they shared a simple but satisfying meal of corn cakes and rabbit stew. Running Fox, excited by the storm and the unexpected visit, asked Thomas to continue their reading of Robinson Crusoe. Thomas obliged, his voice competing with the wind's moans and the occasional crash of thunder. Eventually, Running Fox drifted to sleep, curled on his mat near the fire, the wooden eagle clutched in his small hand. Thomas and Morning Star sat, in comfortable silence, listening to the storm's fury gradually subside to a steady drumming of rain. "He sleeps peacefully," Thomas observed, nodding toward the boy. "Despite the storm, he feels safe," Morning Star replied. "With you here?" The simple statement carried weight beyond its words. Thomas studied her face in the firelight, seeing both strength and vulnerability in her features. "What will you do?" she asked suddenly. "If this soldier Harrington tries to stop you from coming here?" "I'll find a way," Thomas answered without hesitation. "Some things are worth fighting for. And what is this thing worth fighting for?" Her question hung in the air between them, demanding honesty. Thomas chose his words carefully. "When Caroline died, I thought that part of my life was over. The part where I belonged with someone, where I mattered to someone. I came west expecting only to exist, not to live." He met her gaze steadily. "But here, with you and Running Fox, I found myself living again." Morning Star was silent for a long moment. "My husband told me before he left for the last time that if he did not return, I must not let his memory become a prison." Her voice was low, almost a whisper. "For a long time, I did not understand, or did not wish to understand. And now?" Thomas hardly dared to breathe. "Now I begin to see what he meant." She looked toward her sleeping son. "Running Fox needs a father, a good man to teach him, protect him." "And you?" Thomas asked gently. "What do you need?" Her eyes returned to his, dark and fathomless in the firelight. "I need to know if a bridge can truly be built between our worlds. If promises made will be kept when storms come." Outside, the wind had calmed, but rain still fell in a steady rhythm on the roof. Inside, in the warm circle of firelight with a sleeping child between them, two people from different worlds considered the possibility of a shared future and the price it might demand of them both. Thomas returned to his trading post the morning after the storm, his mind churning with the conversation shared by firelight. For days afterward, he found himself distracted, weighing possibilities he'd never imagined would be his to consider again. He found the small box tucked away in his trunk, untouched since he'd left Boston. Inside lay Caroline's silver ring, simple band engraved with intertwining leaves that had belonged to his mother before her. He'd kept it out of reverence for memory, never expecting it might someday serve its purpose again. Thomas polished the tarnished silver until it gleamed, then sat for a long while, the ring resting in his palm. Was he betraying Caroline's memory? No, he could almost hear her practical voice. "Love isn't diminished by being shared, Thomas. It multiplies." His decision crystallized not in a moment of passion, but in a quiet morning as he opened the trading post. A settler couple arrived with their young son, who proudly showed Thomas a stone he'd found. The simple family interaction, the fond glances between husband and wife, their shared pride in their child awakened in Thomas a longing so acute it was almost physical pain. He wanted that again. Not just friendship or companionship, but family. And he wanted it with Morning Star, and Running Fox. The opportunity to speak with Morning Star alone came sooner than expected. She arrived at the trading post late one afternoon, as he was preparing to close, without Running Fox accompanying her for once. He is learning winter songs with the elders, she explained, setting a basket of herbal remedies on the counter her usual trade goods. Thomas hesitated, suddenly nervous. I'm glad you came. There's something I've been wanting to discuss with you. Morning Star regarded him steadily, her dark eyes revealing nothing of her thoughts. Yes? Thomas closed the trading post door and turned the sign to closed, giving them privacy. He gestured for her to sit in one of the rough wooden chairs by the stove, taking the other for himself. I've been thinking about what we discussed during the storm, he began, his heart pounding uncomfortably. About bridges between worlds and promises that withstand storms. She nodded, waiting. I know the challenges would be considerable, he continued. There would be disapproval from both our communities. Perhaps worse than disapproval. Yes, she agreed. Much worse, perhaps. But I've come to believe that some things are worth any price. Thomas reached into his pocket, his fingers closing around the silver ring. Morning Star, I care deeply for you and for Running Fox. I believe we could build a good life together, honoring both our traditions. Her expression softened, but she shook her head slowly. Thomas, it is not simple. My people have seen white men's promises broken many times. Marriage between our kinds, it rarely ends well. I understand your caution, he acknowledged. But I'm not asking for an immediate answer. I'm asking you to consider the possibility. Thomas withdrew the ring, holding it out in his palm. This was my mother's, then Caroline's. In my culture, it symbolizes an unending commitment. He described its significance carefully, not wanting to pressure her with alien customs. I would be honored if you would accept it, when and if you decide that our paths should join. Morning Star looked at the ring but didn't take it. In Apache way, marriage needs approval from family, from elders. There are ceremonies, exchanges. I would respect all of that, Thomas assured her. I would learn your ways, participate in your traditions. And your people? Would they accept? An Apache woman as your wife? Thomas couldn't lie to her. Some would, many wouldn't. But their approval isn't what matters to me. Morning Star was silent for a long moment, her gaze distant. Running Fox has already given his approval, she finally said, with the ghost of a smile. He told me many weeks ago that you would make a good father. Children often see clearly what adults complicate. Thomas echoed his earlier words. Before I can answer, Morning Star said carefully, I must speak with White Hawk, our eldest. His wisdom guides many decisions. Of course, Thomas agreed, though anxiety twisted in his stomach. The tribal elder had been civil but cool during Thomas's visits to the settlement. And, she continued, I must know that you understand what this would mean. Not just taking a wife, but accepting my people as your people. Learning our ways, protecting our traditions. I would try to be worthy of that trust, Thomas promised. Every day. Morning Star's eyes met his, searching. Whatever she found there seemed to satisfy her, for she reached out and gently closed his fingers around the ring. Keep this safe, she said. I will speak with White Hawk and listen to my heart. She rose to leave, then paused. Thomas, whatever comes, know that you have brought light back to my son's eyes and to mine. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and placed a soft kiss on his cheek, their first physical contact beyond brief touches of hands. The gesture, simple yet profound, left him speechless. After she departed, Thomas stood motionless in the trading post, his hand still clutching the ring, his cheek warm from her kiss. Outside, the winter sun was setting, painting the desert in gold and shadow. For the first time since Caroline's death, Thomas allowed himself to look toward the future with hope instead of resignation. Whatever obstacles lay ahead, Harrington's threats, community disapproval, cultural differences, they would face them together. This, Thomas realized, was what Caroline had meant about finding purpose again. Not just existing, but building something meaningful, even in the face of opposition. As night fell across the territory, Thomas made a silent promise to both the woman he had lost and the woman he hoped to gain. He would not squander this unexpected second chance at happiness. Word traveled quickly in both communities. Within days of Morningstar's consultation with White Hawk, Thomas noticed changed behaviors among his customers. Some settlers who had been friendly for years now completed their transactions in stony silence. Others refused to enter the trading post at all, sending children or hired hands with terse lists of necessities. The threatening letter appeared one morning, slipped under his door during the night. The crude, block lettering read, "Nitrogen monoxide, white man weds a savage. Leave this territory or face the consequences." Thomas crumpled it in his fist, anger rising like bile in his throat. This was the world they would face together, this hatred, this fear of difference. Only Samuel Wilson, the territory's aging doctor, remained steadfast. He visited the trading post specifically to express his support. Known Morningstar for years, the white-bearded physician said, settling his bulky frame onto Thomas's wooden chair. "Fine woman. Saved more lives with her herbs than I have with my medical bag. Truth be told." "Not everyone shares your view," Thomas replied, gesturing toward the crumpled letter on his counter. Wilson snorted. "Fools and cowards. Anonymous threats, the weapon of those without the courage of their convictions." He leaned forward. "But don't underestimate them, Thomas. Hatred runs deep out here." "I know," Thomas acknowledged. "But I can't let fear dictate my life." "Good man." Wilson nodded approvingly. "Just know you have at least one ally among the settler community. I'll stand witness at your wedding, if you'll have me." Thomas gripped the older man's hand gratefully. "I'd be honored." Among the Apache, reactions were equally mixed, but less overtly hostile. White Hawk, surprisingly, had given a conditional blessing after meeting privately with Morningstar. The ancient elder later told Thomas, "I have seen many winters come and go. In each one, our people lose more land, traditions, lives. Perhaps it is time to build bridges instead of walls." But his approval came with expectations. "You must learn our ways," White Hawk insisted. "Not just words, but meanings, ceremonies, history. Before you take Morningstar as wife, you must understand what it means to be Apache." Not all tribal members were so accepting. Gray Wolf, Morningstar's cousin and a respected warrior, made his opposition clear during a tribal council. "The white man takes our land, kills our people, and now wants our women," he argued bitterly. "Where will it end? Will we give him our children to raise as white men, forgetting the old ways?" Morningstar faced these challenges with quiet dignity. "Swift Hawk would want his son to have a father," she responded. "One who respects our traditions and will teach Running Fox to walk in both worlds." Running Fox himself became the target of taunts from both sides. Subtlety to the tribe. One evening, the boy arrived at the trading post with a bloody nose and torn clothing. Thomas cleaned his injuries gently, rage building at whoever had hurt this child. "Who did this?" he asked. "White boys," Running Fox admitted reluctantly. "They said I was a traitor." "That my mother was," he stopped, unwilling to repeat the vile words. Thomas knelt to meet the boy's eyes. "Listen to me. People fear what they don't understand. Their words, their fists, they come from that fear. But you know the truth about your mother, about me, about what building together. A family, Running Fox said softly. Yes, Thomas placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. And family protects each other, stands together. Never be ashamed of who you are, Apache. And soon, in some ways, part of my world too. That makes you stronger, not weaker. The boycott of Thomas's trading post intensified. Inventory went unsold. Supplies he ordered from Santa Fe arrived with items missing or damaged. His meager savings began to dwindle. Some nights he worried about their future. How would he provide for a family with his livelihood under siege? Yet for every act of rejection, there were small kindnesses. An elderly Apache woman left a basket of cornmeal on his doorstep. A settler family new to the territory, unaware of the controversy, became regular customers and commented on the fine Indian crafts he stocked. Dr. Wilson brought patients to the trading post, deliberately creating business that Morningstar faced. Her own trials. The women's circle, where Apache females gathered to work and share wisdom, fell silent when she joined. Some mothers pulled their daughters away, as though her choice might be contagious. They will accept in time, she told Thomas. During one of their meetings, though doubt shadowed her eyes. Or they will not. We must make our own path. One evening, as Thomas was closing the trading post, he noticed a group of riders approaching Harrington and 4 of his soldiers. They dismounted leisurely, blocking the entrance. Evening, Miller, Harrington drawled. Heard congratulations. Are in order. Taking a squaw bride, are you? Thomas's jaw tightened. I'd appreciate you using respectful language in my establishment, Captain. Harrington laughed, a sound without humor. Respect? For this savage-loving business? He stepped closer, lowering his voice. This marriage won't happen, Miller. One way or another, I'll see to that. Is that a threat? Thomas held his ground, though he was acutely aware of being outnumbered. Considerate friendly advice. Harrington turned to leave, then added, Things burn easily out here in the dry season. Trading posts, Indian dwellings. Shame how one spark can destroy so much. After they rode away, Thomas stood in the doorway for a long time, watching the dust settle in their wake. The landscape stretched before him, beautiful and harsh in the fading light, much like the life he had chosen. That night, he slept with a loaded rifle beside his bed for the first time since arriving in the territory. Despite mounting opposition, Thomas and Morningstar devoted themselves to bridging the cultural divide between them. Their most tangible effort took the form of a small, handmade book deerskin covers, carefully stitched around pages of the Trading Post's finest paper. On these pages, they began recording words and phrases in both English and Apache, creating a shared language that belonged uniquely to them. Ish Kishens Lin, Morningstar said one evening, pointing to her heart. It means my heart. Ish Kishens Lin? Thomas repeated carefully, his pronunciation improving after weeks of practice. Running Fox, who had appointed himself their official translator, giggled. Almost right. Try again. Thomas exaggerated his next attempt, making the boy laugh harder. Morningstar's eyes crinkled with amusement, though she maintained her teacher's composure. Better? She acknowledged. Now right. Thomas carefully inscribed both the Apache word and its English translation in their book. The pages had begun to fill with everyday terms, foods, animals, tools, but lately had expanded to include more personal expressions. Happiness, sorrow, family, love. These language lessons took place in the relative privacy of Thomas's living quarters behind the trading post. While their engagement was known, they agreed to minimize public interactions until the wedding, hoping to reduce provocations to those who opposed their union. In my tribe, Morningstar explained during one lesson, a man must prove himself worthy to his future wife's family through gifts and respectful behavior. That's not so different from my culture, Thomas observed, though the gifts are usually more symbolic now. What symbol did you give in your first marriage? She asked, her question direct but gentle. Thomas touched the silver ring that now hung on a leather cord around Morning Star's neck. Her compromise between accepting his proposal and waiting until their wedding to wear it properly. The ring is one symbol, but also promises to provide, protect, remain faithful. He smiled ruefully. The providing part has become more challenging lately. The trading post's business had declined dramatically. Some days passed without a single customer. Thomas had begun to sell personal possessions to maintain essential supplies. Apache do not need many things, Morning Star assured him. We find what we need in the land. I want to offer you more than just survival, Thomas admitted. She touched his hand lightly. You offer what matters most: respect, kindness to my son, willingness to learn our ways. Running Fox, who had been practicing his English letters nearby, looked up. Teach him the wedding blessing, mother. Morning Star's expression grew solemn. It is sacred, meant to be learned when the time is right. When will the time be right? Thomas asked. When White Hawk says? He watches your progress. If you learn enough of our ways before the spring moon, he will allow the ceremony then. The pressure of this deadline added intensity to their studies. Beyond language, Thomas immersed himself in Apache customs, proper behavior at ceremonies, traditional stories, the complex kinship system that would soon include him. In return, he taught Morning Star to read English with greater fluency, explained settler customs, and at her request demonstrated how to bake bread in the small cast-iron stove. Women of your tribe make this daily? She asked, kneading dough with strong, capable hands. Many do. Carolyn baked every morning before school. The memory came without pain now, softened by time and his growing feelings for Morning Star. Tell me more about her, Morning Star requested, surprising him. When he hesitated, she added, She is part of who you are. I wish to understand. So Thomas spoke of Carolyn, her intelligence, her quiet determination, her belief in education for all children, regardless of background. Morning Star listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that revealed her genuine interest in the woman who had first held his heart. She would have liked you, Thomas concluded. She believed in building bridges too. Running Fox, who had been unusually quiet during this exchange, suddenly asked, Can I tell about my father too? Of course, Thomas answered immediately. Boy described Swift Hawk's skill as a hunter, his bravery in battle, his talent for carving and storytelling. Morning Star added details her son was too young to remember, how Swift Hawk could charm birds from trees with his flute playing, how he had defied tradition to court her when her family initially disapproved. He sounds like a remarkable man, Thomas said sincerely. I wish I could have known him. He would have challenged you to a race, Running Fox said with certainty. He always tested new friends that way, and I would have lost spectacularly. Thomas laughed. These exchanges, sharing memories of those they had loved and lost, created unexpected bonds between them. They were building not just a bridge between cultures, but a new family history that honored what came before while creating something entirely their own. One evening, after a particularly productive language session, Morning Star surprised Thomas. By participating in a settler tradition, she had learned about a handshake to seal an agreement. I have decision, she announced, extending her hand formally. If White Hawk approves, we will marry at the spring equinox. Both ways, Apache ceremony and your Christian words. Thomas took her offered hand, then boldly raised it to his lips. In a gesture neither fully Apache nor fully settler, something new belonging just to them. Ish Kishens Lin, he said, his pronunciation perfect this time. Morning Star's smile illuminated her face. Yes, she agreed softly. My heart also. Running Fox watched this exchange with evident satisfaction, then carefully wrote the date of the spring equinox in their language book, his first independent entry, marking the day his mother's loneliness and his own would finally end. Thomas was reviewing his dwindling inventory when the trading post door swung open with unnecessary force. Captain Harrington entered alone, which was unusual. He typically traveled with a contingent of soldiers. Something about his solitary appearance made him more threatening, not less. "Miller," he nodded curtly, removing his gloves with deliberate precision. "Captain," Thomas acknowledged, continuing his work. He had learned that showing fear or deference only emboldened men like Harrington. The captain wandered the trading post, idly examining goods while Thomas watched from the corner of his eye. Finally, Harrington approached the counter, a rolled document in his hand. "Still planning that unholy union with your Apache woman?" he asked casually. Thomas sat down. His pencil. "My personal life isn't military business, Captain." "Oh, but it is." Harrington smiled thinly. "Everything in this territory is military business when it concerns relations with the indigenous population." He unrolled the document land deed papers with Thomas's name and property description, especially when it involves questions of land ownership. Thomas stiffened. "My claim is legal and registered with the territorial authority." "Indeed it is," Harrington agreed, studying the document. "Registered to one Thomas Miller, settler and trader, a respectable white man serving the needs of the advancing frontier." His cold blue eyes lifted to Thomas's face. "But there's a clause in territorial land grants about moral fitness and community standards." Interesting reading. Thomas felt a chill despite the warmth of the stove. "Are you threatening my land claim?" "Threatening? No." Harrington re-rolled the document, simply pointing out that land ownership is a privilege granted by the United States government to those who uphold its values and further its interests. He placed the papers on the counter. "Miscegenation, the mixing of races, is neither valued nor in the nation's interests." "That's your opinion, not the law," Thomas countered, though uncertainty gnawed at him. The territorial statutes were vague and often selectively enforced. "Laws are interpreted by those with authority to do so," Harrington replied smoothly. "And out here, that authority rests significantly with the military presence." He leaned closer. "But I'm not unreasonable, Miller. End this farce of an engagement. Maintain proper distance from the Apache, and your claim remains secure. And if I don't, then I'd expect a review of your claim by the Territorial Land Office, followed by a notice of revocation." Harrington straightened. "Which would be a shame. Building a life only to see it taken away, rather like what happened to the Apache, isn't it?" Before Thomas could respond, the captain added casually, "Of course, the Apache won't be your neighbors much longer anyway." "What does that mean?" Thomas demanded, alarm rising. "Progress, Miller. The territory is expanding. Settlers need good land, not just the scrub and desert. The Apache reservation has been redrawn. New boundaries, further south. Orders came through last week." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "They'll be relocated within 2 months." Thomas gripped the edge of the counter. "You can't just move an entire community of people." "The government can and will. It's already decided." Harrington adjusted his uniform jacket. "So you see, your little romance has a natural expiration date. The only question is whether you lose your woman or your land or both." "These people have lived here for generations," Thomas argued, struggling to control his anger. "This is their ancestral land." "Was their land," Harrington corrected. "Progress doesn't accommodate sentiment, Miller. Railroads are coming. Towns will be built. The future belongs to civilization, not savages clinging to outdated ways." "And you're the arbiter of civilization?" Thomas couldn't keep the contempt from his voice. Harrington's expression hardened. "Careful, Miller. Sympathizing with Indians over your own kind borders on sedition. Treating people with basic human dignity isn't sedition. It's decency. Decency? Harrington laughed harshly. Is that what you call running with a savage woman? Don't dress up base appetites as noble intentions. Thomas stepped around the counter. His patience snapped. Get out. Now. Harrington's hand moved to his sidearm. Threatening an officer is a serious offense. I'm asking you to leave my property. That's my right as a landowner. Thomas stood his ground, though he was acutely aware of the captain's pistol. Or is that right already revoked? For a tense moment, the two men faced each other. Then Harrington relaxed deliberately, his hand moving away from his weapon. You're making a grave mistake, Miller. One that will cost you everything. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Think about what I've said. The Apache will be moved regardless of your actions. The only variable is whether you'll still have a place in this territory afterward. After Harrington left, Thomas sat, heavily on a wooden stool, the land deed papers still on his counter. The captain's threats weren't idle. Thomas had heard rumors of other settlers losing claims on technicalities when they opposed military or railroad interests. But more concerning was the news about the reservation boundaries. If true, it would devastate the Apache community and potentially separate him from Morning Star and Running Fox unless he abandoned everything he had built here. The trading post bell jangled as Dr. Wilson entered, his expression grave. Just past Harrington on the road, he said without preamble. Looked mighty pleased with himself. Thomas quickly explained the captain's threats and the news about the reservation relocation. Wilson shook his head grimly. I've heard rumors about the boundary changes. Didn't want to believe it, but he sighed heavily. The captain has powerful friends in the territorial capital. If he's determined to cause trouble for you, he can. What would you do? Thomas asked, valuing the older man's perspective. Wilson considered carefully before answering. When I came west 40 years ago, I thought my medical knowledge made me superior to the native healers. Took me years to realize they understood things about this land and its remedies that no Eastern education could provide. He met Thomas's gaze directly. I've watched good men surrender their principles for security. Never saw one who didn't regret it eventually. Even if it costs me everything, some things are worth the price, son. Wilson placed a weathered hand on Thomas's shoulder. Question is, are Morning Star and that boy among those things for you? Thomas didn't hesitate. Yes, then you already have your answer. Wilson moved toward the door. I'll ask around about these reservation plans. Maybe there's a way to fight them, or at least delay implementation. After the doctor left, Thomas carefully refolded his land deed papers, aware they might soon be worthless. Yet strangely, the prospect troubled him less than he would have expected. Land and possessions could be replaced. What he had found with Morning Star and Running Fox could not. Thomas arrived at the Apache settlement with a heavy heart, burdened by the knowledge of Harrington's threats. He found Morning Star outside her dwelling, preparing medicinal herbs with several other women. Their conversation halted abruptly. At his approach, and all but Morning Star quickly dispersed. You bring troubled thoughts, she observed, reading his expression with uncanny accuracy. We need to talk, Thomas said quietly, about the future. Inside her dwelling, he explained Harrington's visit and the plans to relocate the Apache. Morning Star received the news with outward calm, though Thomas noticed her hands tighten around a basket she was holding. Our elders have heard whispers of this, she acknowledged. But to move us before the planting season ... She shook her head. Many will not survive a winter in a new place without prepared fields and knowledge of the hunting grounds. I won't let this happen, Thomas promised, though he knew how empty such assurances might be against government decrees. Some things cannot be stopped by one man's will, Morning Star replied gently. Like the great river that carves the canyon, it follows its path despite the rocks that would stand against it. Their conversation was interrupted by Running Fox's excited entrance. "Mother," Talking Crow calls for Thomas. All the council waits. Thomas and Morning Star exchanged puzzled glances. Talking Crow was the tribe's elderly medicine man, a reclusive figure who rarely participated in daily tribal matters. To be summoned by him was unusual and significant. Why would he ask for me? Thomas wondered. He has been in isolation for 4 days, Running Fox explained breathlessly. In the spirit cave, seeking visions. He emerged this morning and called. For the council and for you. Morning Star's expression grew solemn. This is a great honor, Thomas, and unusual for an outsider. They followed Running Fox to the center of the settlement, where tribal elders had gathered in a semicircle. At their center sat Talking Crow, his ancient face deeply lined, his long white hair adorned with small feathers and beads. Despite his advanced age, his dark eyes were sharp and penetrating beneath heavy brows. White Hawk gestured for Thomas to sit across from the medicine man. The other elders watched with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Gray Wolf, Morning Star's cousin, stood slightly apart, his posture radiating disapproval. For several long moments, Talking Crow studied Thomas in silence. Then he began to speak in Apache, his voice surprisingly strong. White Hawk translated for Thomas. 4 days and nights, Talking Crow sought the guidance of the spirits regarding the future of our people and your place among us, the elder explained. On the 4th night, as the Morning Star rose, he received a powerful vision. Talking Crow continued speaking, occasionally making sweeping gestures with his gnarled hands. White Hawk translated carefully. He saw a great eagle flying from this east your direction. Not an Apache eagle, but one with different markings. This eagle circled our settlement 3 times, then landed in our midst. Many were afraid, but the eagle harmed no one. Instead, it stood guard while coyotes and wolves prowled at the edges of our camp. Thomas listened intently, aware of the metaphorical significance eagles held in Apache culture. Then the land began to shake. White Hawk continued translating. A great crack opened in the earth, separating our people from our ancestral grounds. Many fell into darkness. But the eagle extended one wing across the divide, creating a bridge. Those who trusted enough to walk across the eagle's wing reached safety. Talking Crow paused and addressed Thomas directly in halting English. You, Eagle Spirit. Not Apache, but protector for Apache. The medicine man reached into a small pouch at his waist and withdrew a single eagle feather, a sacred object of great significance. He held it out to Thomas. Eagle wing becomes bridge between worlds, Talking Crow said. You help our people cross to new life. Unsure of the proper protocol, Thomas looked to White Hawk for guidance. The elder nodded slightly, indicating he should accept the feather. Thomas took it carefully, aware of the profound honor being bestowed. I will try to be worthy of this trust, he said simply. Talking Crow nodded once and spoke again in Apache. White Hawk translated. The medicine man says you must be given an Apache name to fulfill your destiny among us. He names you Eagle, heart one with the courage and vision to soar above boundaries. Gray Wolf stepped forward, finally breaking his silence. With respect, Talking Crow, can we trust this vision? The white man has deceived us many times. Talking Crow's response needed no translation. The sharp rebuke in his tone was clear. White Hawk explained, he says that doubting the vision insults not him, but the Creator who sent it. The medicine man spoke again, at length. As White Hawk translated, Thomas noticed several elders nodding in agreement. Talking Crow reminds us that our people have always recognized that spirits choose unexpected vessels. Just as changing woman taught us to adapt while keeping our essential nature, so must we recognize when the old ways of thinking must yield to new realities. The eagle in his vision was not Apache, yet it protected Apache people. Gray Wolf bowed his head, accepting the rebuke, though his expression remained troubled. Talking Crow then addressed the entire council, speaking with increasing animation. White Hawk translated, "He says the threat to our land that he saw in his. Vision is real and coming soon. We must prepare for great change. But this man," he gestured to Thomas, "will help our people find a path through the danger if we accept him as one of our own." The medicine man finished speaking and closed. His eyes, indicating the audience was concluded. One by one, the elders rose and approached Thomas, each touching the eagle feather he held and offering a word of acknowledgement. Even Gray Wolf participated in this ritual, though he did so with visible reluctance. Later, as they walked back, to Morning Star's dwelling, she explained the significance of what had occurred. Talking Crow has not shared a vision of such importance in many seasons. His blessing carries great weight. "Will it change how your people view our marriage?" Thomas asked. "Many who doubted will now support us," she confirmed. "They believe you are sent to help us through difficult times ahead." Her expression grew solemn. "But this vision also confirms what you told me. Our land is threatened. The great crack in the earth is the government forcing us from our homes." Running Fox, who had watched the ceremony with wide-eyed wonder, tugged at Thomas's sleeve. "Eagleheart," he repeated, testing the name with evident approval. "Now you have an Apache name, like me." Thomas smiled at the boy's enthusiasm, but his thoughts remained troubled. Talking Crow's vision had earned him acceptance among the Apache, but it had also emphasized the challenges ahead. Being named a protector was an honor, but it carried enormous responsibility, one he wasn't certain he could fulfill against the might of the U.S. government and men like Harrington. With Talking Crow's blessing and the spring equinox approaching, wedding preparations began in earnest. Thomas devoted himself to learning the Apache marriage customs from White Hawk, determined to honor Morning Star's traditions properly. "The ceremony has 4 parts," the elder explained during one of their sessions. "First, the blessing of the 4 directions. Then, the exchange of gifts to show that you will provide for each other. Third, the sharing of food and water from the same vessel. Finally, the blanket wrapping to show you are now one family under the same covering." Thomas committed each detail to memory, practicing the Apache words he would need to speak. He would do this right, not just as a gesture of respect, but because he had come to value these traditions that had sustained Morning Star's people through centuries of challenges. Meanwhile, Dr. Wilson had agreed to find a justice of the peace, willing to perform a legal ceremony that would be recognized by territorial authorities. "Not every official will do it," the doctor warned, "but I know a fellow in the next county who's married 3 interracial couples. Decent man who believes the law should serve people, not prejudice." The most touching preparation came from Running Fox, who took his role in the ceremony with utmost seriousness. Apache custom dictated that a male relative must symbolically give a widow to her new husband, signifying the family's blessing. As Morning Star's only male relative present, Gray Wolf having refused this honor, Running Fox would fulfill this duty. "I must practice the words many times," the boy insisted, rehearsing the traditional phrases with Thomas each evening. "They must be perfect." The practical aspects of the wedding proved more challenging. The boycott of Thomas's trading post had depleted his resources, making it difficult to obtain the customary gifts and provisions for the wedding feast. Morning Star noticed his concern one afternoon as he reviewed his dwindling finances. "Our way does not require many things," she assured him. "The meaning is in the sharing, not in how much is shared." "I want to honor you properly," Thomas replied. "Not start our marriage in lack." Morning Star smiled, her eyes softening. "My people judge wealth differently. A man with wisdom, courage, and a kind heart toward children. This is true richness. Despite these reassurances, Thomas was determined to provide a proper celebration. He traded his pocket watch, a keepsake from his father, to a passing merchant for coffee, sugar, and flour. He spent evenings hunting to ensure meat for the feast. Dr. Wilson contributed a bottle of fine whiskey for those guests who partake, and even managed to secure a small cake from the territorial capital. Throughout these preparations, Thomas remained vigilant for any sign of interference from Harrington. The captain had been conspicuously absent since their confrontation, which worried Thomas more than his overt threats. Men like Harrington didn't surrender their prejudices easily. They merely changed tactics. For her part, Morning Star created her wedding garments with meticulous care. Thomas caught glimpses of the white buckskin dress she was crafting, adorned with intricate beadwork and patterns that told the story of her family. It incorporated elements from both cultures' traditional Apache designs, alongside subtle touches inspired by the subtler wedding dresses she had observed. It is not usual for a groom to see the wedding clothes before the ceremony, she scolded gently when she caught him admiring her work. In my culture, too, Thomas admitted with a smile. Some traditions cross all boundaries. As the wedding day approached, Thomas prepared the place where they would live as a family. Though Morning Star had initially assumed they would reside in the Apache settlement, practical considerations led them to decide on the living quarters behind the trading post, at least initially. The room was small but sound, and Thomas worked to make it welcoming, adding a larger bed, shelves for Morning Star's belongings, and a separate sleeping area for running Foxdot. When he showed Morning Star these preparations, an unexpected wave of emotion overcame her. She stood silently in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth. Is something wrong? Thomas asked, suddenly uncertain. If you don't like it, no, she interrupted, her voice soft. It is ... double quotes. She searched for the English word. It is home. I did not expect to feel this again. That evening, they sat together outside the trading post, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and purple. Running Fox had fallen asleep with his head in his mother's lap, exhausted from the day's excitement. Are you certain? Thomas asked quietly, giving her one final opportunity to reconsider. Your life will change in many ways. Some may never, except our union. Morning Star stroked her son's hair gently. When Swifthawk died, I thought my heart died too. I lived only for our son. She looked up at Thomas, her dark eyes reflecting the fading light. You have given me back the future. Whatever comes, we face together. Thomas took her hand, marveling at how this woman's strength had revitalized his own broken spirit. Together, he agreed. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, they spoke of practical matters, the ceremony arrangements, the guests who had accepted their invitation, the traditional foods being prepared. Yet beneath these details lay a deeper current of anticipation, a sense that they stood at the threshold of something both ancient and entirely new. 2 days before the wedding, a letter arrived from the territorial capital, delivered by a nervous young courier. Thomas read it with increasing disbelief, then shared it with Morning Star. The territorial governor will be passing through on an inspection tour, he explained. Dr. Wilson apparently wrote to him about our situation. He's agreed to attend our wedding and personally validate our marriage certificate. Morning Star understood the significance immediately. Even Harrington cannot challenge the governor's authority. It seems we have more allies than we knew, Thomas marveled. That night, they added one final entry to their language book, the Apache and English words for hope, written in both their handwriting, a testament to the bridge they had built between their worlds and the future they would now create together. Dawn broke clear and golden on the wedding day, painting the desert in shades of amber and rose. Thomas awoke early, too filled with anticipation to sleep. According to both traditions, He would not see Morning Star until the ceremony, so he busied himself with final preparations at the trading post, which had been transformed for the occasion. The interior had been cleared to create an open space, with benches arranged in a circle rather than rows honoring the Apache custom while accommodating older settler guests. Fresh juniper boughs decorated the walls, their sharp, clean scent filling the air. Outside, a fire pit had been prepared for the feast to follow. Dr. Wilson arrived mid-morning, accompanying the justice of the peace, and to Thomas's astonishment, the territorial governor himself, a dignified man with silver hair and a formal black suit. The governor greeted Thomas warmly. "Dr. Wilson speaks highly of you, Mr. Miller," he said, shaking Thomas's hand. "Says you're building the kind of bridges this territory needs for a peaceful future." "I'm honored by your presence, sir," Thomas replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the officials' attendance. "Policies and proclamations have their place," the governor mused, "but real change happens in communities, between people who choose understanding over division." He smiled slightly. "Besides, my wife would never forgive me if I passed up the chance to attend what she calls the most romantic wedding in the territory." As midday approached, more guests arrived. From the settler community came a handful of sympathetic families, mostly newer arrivals to the territory who hadn't yet absorbed its entrenched prejudices. From the Apache side came White Hawk, Talking, Crow, and several other elders, along with families who had grown to accept Thomas through his efforts to learn their ways. Thomas wore his best suit somewhat worn, but carefully brushed with the eagle feather Talking Crow had given him secured in his lapel. Around his wrist was the grass bracelet Running Fox had made months earlier, now frayed but still intact. When the appointed hour arrived, a murmur passed through the gathered guests. Thomas turned to see Running Fox approaching, resplendent in traditional Apache ceremonial clothing, his young face solemn with the importance of his role. Behind him walked Morning Star. Thomas's breath caught in his throat. She wore the white buckskin dress she had crafted, its intricate beadwork catching the light with every movement. Her hair fell loose around her shoulders, adorned with small flowers and feathers. Around her neck hung his mother's silver ring on its leather cord. But it was her expression that truly captivated him, a mixture of dignity, joy, and quiet certainty that matched the emotions surging within his own heart. The ceremony began with White Hawk addressing the gathering in Apache, then English. "We stand between worlds today," the elder said, his voice carrying clearly, "as these two people stand between worlds. What they build together is a new path, not erasing the old ways, but finding how different traditions can strengthen each other." Running Fox stepped forward, his chin held high despite his nervousness. He recited the traditional phrases flawlessly, formally presenting his mother to Thomas. "I give to you my mother's hand," he concluded in English, then added with unscripted enthusiasm, "and my heart too." A gentle laugh rippled through the gathering, easing any remaining tension. The ceremony proceeded with elements from both traditions woven together. They faced the four directions as White Hawk blessed their union in the Apache way. They exchanged simple gifts, Thomas presenting Morning Star with a silver bracelet. He had traded his last valuable possession to obtain. Morning Star giving Thomas a woven headband signifying his acceptance into the tribe. Then came the moment Thomas had been practicing for weeks, his vows in Apache. He spoke carefully, honoring her language. "I take you as my wife under the eyes of Creator. I promise to walk beside you, not before or behind, to protect your spirit as well as your body, to honor your people as my people, to be father to your son, to remain faithful until I walk the spirit path." Morning Star's eyes shone as she responded with her vows in English, her voice clear and steady. "I take you as my husband, joining our paths into one. I will stand with you in joy and sorrow. I will make your dwelling place my home. I will teach our son to honor both his heritages. I will remain true to you through all seasons of our life together. The justice of the peace then led them through the Christian vows, which they repeated in English. When he pronounced them husband and wife, by the authority of the territorial government, the governor stepped forward to witness their signatures on the marriage certificate, making their union legally unassailable. The most moving moment came with the blanket ceremony. Running Fox proudly presented a special blanket of unity, woven in a pattern that incorporated both Apache designs and settler motifs. White Hawk and Dr. Wilson together wrapped it around the couple's shoulders, symbolically creating one family from two traditions. What creator has joined? White Hawk intoned. Let no person tear asunder. Amen to that, Dr. Wilson added with heartfelt emphasis. As the ceremony concluded, Thomas and Morning Star shared their first public kiss, a brief, tender moment that, nevertheless, caused a few gasps from the more traditional guests of both communities. Running Fox watched with undisguised delight before impulsively throwing his arms around both of them, creating a family embrace that drew approving murmurs from the gathering. The celebration that followed blended traditions as seamlessly as the ceremony had. Apache drummers played traditional songs, while settler guests contributed fiddle music. Children from both communities played together, their natural openness unhindered by adult prejudices. The feast combined foods from both cultures, roasted venison and rabbit, alongside biscuits and cake. As evening approached, Thomas found a moment alone with his new wife, watching the celebration from a quiet corner. Are you happy? He asked softly. Morning Star leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of intimacy that would have been unthinkable in public just months before. My heart is full, she replied simply. Like a river after the spring rains. Thomas took her hand, the silver bracelet glinting on her wrist. Whatever comes, we face it together now. As family, she agreed, her gaze finding Running Fox, who is teaching some settler children an Apache game. All of us. The celebration continued as twilight settled over the desert. Lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the gathering. The territorial governor had departed with cordial congratulations, but most guests remained, the unusual mixing of cultures, creating a curious harmony that few had expected. Thomas was speaking with Dr. Wilson when the sound of approaching horses cut through the music and conversation. 6 riders appeared in the fading light, the lead figure's silhouette unmistakable, even before he entered the circle of lantern light. Captain Harrington dismounted with fluid precision, his uniform immaculate despite the dusty ride. 5 soldiers followed, their hands resting too casually near their sidearms. The captain surveyed the celebration with cold disdain, his gaze lingering on the Apache guests before finding Thomas. Miller, he called, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent gathering. Quite the spectacle you've created here. Thomas moved forward, positioning himself between Harrington and Morning Star. This is a private celebration, Captain. You weren't invited. Official business requires no invitation, Harrington replied, removing his gloves with deliberate slowness. Especially when it concerns violations of territorial order. Dr. Wilson stepped beside Thomas. The governor himself just witnessed their legal marriage, Harrington. There's no violation here. The captain's expression flickered with momentary surprise before hardening again. The marriage is merely one concern. I've received reports of illegal trading activities. His gaze shifted to the Apache guests. Specifically, providing restricted goods to Indians without proper authorization. One of the soldiers produced a document with an official seal. I have orders to inspect the premises and confiscate any evidence of such violations. Morning Star moved to Thomas's side, her dignity undiminished by Harrington's intrusion. Running. Fox attempted to join them, but she gently directed him to stay with White Hawk, sensing the dangerous undercurrents. This is harassment, not law enforcement, Thomas stated flatly. There are no restricted goods here. Harrington smiled thinly. Then you won't mind if my men take a look. Without waiting for permission, he signaled his soldiers, who began moving. Toward the trading post, White Hawk stepped forward, his ancient face resolute. This man is married according to our ways. He is Apache now, under our protection. Is that so? Harrington's voice dripped with contempt. Seems to me he's gone native indeed. Forgotten what it means to be civilized. The soldier nearest the trading post entrance suddenly shouted, "Captain, look here!" He emerged holding a beautifully crafted peace pipe with eagle feathers attached. To its stem a sacred Apache object. Interesting, Harrington said with feigned surprise. Eagle feathers are prohibited items for trade to Indians under federal law. Quite serious, Miller. That's not a trade item, Thomas objected. It's a ceremonial gift from White Hawk for our wedding. A likely story. Harrington turned to his men. Search everything. I suspect we'll find more violations. As soldiers pushed into the trading post, the atmosphere grew increasingly tense. Apache guests began murmuring among themselves, while settler guests watched with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. Dr. Wilson attempted to reason with Harrington, citing his friendship with the governor, but the captain dismissed him with a curt gesture. Morningstar clutched Thomas's arm. He planned this, she whispered, waited until the governor left. Thomas nodded grimly. Harrington had recognized that he couldn't prevent their marriage, so he'd shifted tactics to destroy what they were building together. The soldiers' search grew increasingly destructive, with sounds of items being toppled and broken inside the trading post. One emerged with the handmade language book Thomas and Morningstar had created together, tossing it dismissively to Harrington. Looks like coded messages to me, Captain, the soldier suggested with a smirk. Harrington flipped through the pages with exaggerated suspicion. Indian language written down for what purpose, Miller? Planning something with your new Apache friends? Before Thomas could respond, another soldier emerged with Morningstar's beaded medicine pouch. Found this hidden behind the counter, sir. Full of strange powders and herbs. The accusation implicit in the discovery was clear illegal substances, or perhaps even materials for witchcraft, as many settlers superstitiously viewed Apache healing practices. That contains sacred healing herbs, Morningstar objected, her voice steady despite her evident distress. For helping the sick, not harming. Silence, woman, Harrington snapped. You have no standing here. She is my wife, Thomas said, his anger rising. You will address her with respect. Harrington stepped closer, his voice lowered for Thomas alone. She's a savage, Miller, and you've become one too, bedding down with her kind. How the mighty have fallen an educated man from Boston, now rutting with Thomas's fist connected. With Harrington's jaw before the captain could finish his vile statement. The impact sent Harrington staggering backward, blood trickling from his split lip. For a moment, shocked silence enveloped the gathering dot, then chaos erupted. Soldiers drew weapons. Apache men moved protectively toward their families and settler. Guests scattered for cover. Dr. Wilson shouted for calm, his voice lost in the tumult. Harrington recovered his balance, wiping blood from his mouth with the back of his hand. His eyes burned with cold fury as he drew his pistol. That's assault on a military officer, Miller. Grounds for immediate arrest, or worse. Morningstar stepped between them, her white, buckskin dress luminous in the lantern light. If you harm him, you must harm me first. Gladly, Harrington snarled, raising his weapon. Several Apache men surged forward, but it was Running Fox who acted most decisively. Breaking free from White Hawk's protective grasp, the boy darted toward the ceremonial fire and seized a burning branch. With a swift motion born of desperation, he flung it toward the hay bales stacked nearby for seating, creating an immediate diversion of flames and smoke. In the ensuing confusion, the beautiful ceremonial peace pipe symbol of harmony between peoples was trampled underfoot and broken. As settlers and Apache alike worked to extinguish the small blaze, Harrington seized the moment to press his advantage. "Arrest him," he ordered his men, gesturing toward Thomas. "Inciting unrest, assaulting an officer, illegal trading. That should be enough to ensure he never operates in this territory again." 2 soldiers moved to comply, but found their path blocked by an unexpected alliance. White Hawk and Dr. Wilson standing shoulder to shoulder, with several men from both communities, forming a human barrier around Thomas and Morning Star. "This has gone far enough, Harrington," Dr. Wilson declared, his voice carrying the authority of his years and respected position. "What will the governor say when he hears you disrupted a wedding he personally sanctioned? How will that reflect on your career prospects?" The standoff teetered on a knife's edge, with armed soldiers facing determined civilians of both cultures. The broken peace pipe lay in pieces on the ground between them, a potent symbol of Harrington's true impact on the territory he claimed to protect. The confrontation hung in perfect, terrible balance, soldiers with weapons half-drawn facing the unlikely alliance of Apache elders and settler families. Running Fox had been pulled back to safety by Morning Star, but the boys' desperate action had changed the dynamic of the encounter, revealing the lengths to which these people would go to protect their own. Harrington's cold gaze swept across the human barrier before him. "This is military jurisdiction now," he declared. "Anyone interfering with the arrest of Thomas Miller will face charges of obstructing justice." "There is no justice in this," White Hawk responded, his ancient voice carrying surprising strength. "Only a man's hatred wearing the mask of law." Dr. Wilson stepped forward, his weathered hands raised in a placating gesture. "Captain, consider your position carefully. You have 6 men against 24 civilians, including women and children. Whatever happens here tonight will be reported far beyond this territory." Harrington's expression didn't waver, but Thomas saw calculation replacing blind fury in his eyes. The captain was ambitious, above all else. He wouldn't risk his career on a miscalculation. "The law is clear," Harrington insisted, though with slightly less conviction. "Miller has violated multiple statutes regarding proper relations with indigenous peoples." "Then let him face those charges properly," Dr. Wilson countered. "Through legal proceedings, not a night raid on his wedding celebration." The tense standoff might have continued indefinitely had fate not intervened. The distant sound of approaching horses drew everyone's attention. A moment later, 2 riders appeared, one a young cavalry lieutenant, the other, astonishingly, Judge Ellsworth, the territorial circuit judge who had accompanied the governor earlier. The lieutenant dismounted quickly, saluting Harrington with evident discomfort. "Captain, sir." Judge Ellsworth insisted on returning when he heard about. He hesitated, glancing at the assembled crowd. "About your planned inspection." Judge Ellsworth, a square-built man with impressive side whiskers and an even more impressive frown, dismounted more deliberately. "Captain Harrington," he rumbled, his voice matching his imposing presence, "would you care to explain why you're disrupting a legally sanctioned wedding with an armed detachment?" Harrington stiffened. "Your Honor, I'm investigating credible reports of illegal trading activities. My jurisdiction as military commander ends precisely where civil authority begins." The judge interrupted, approaching the captain. He surveyed the scene, the frightened guests, the defensive postures, the broken peace pipe on the ground. "And I see no evidence of illegal trading. I do, however, see what appears to be harassment of legally married citizens of this territory. Sir, with respect, you don't understand the situation with these Indians." The judge held up a hand, silencing Harrington mid-sentence. "I understand the law, Captain, and I understand that Governor Davis personally witnessed this marriage and approved it." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. In fact, he was so moved by the occasion that he drafted this before departing. Harrington reluctantly accepted the document, his expression darkening as he read. A special dispensation, the judge explained for the benefit of the onlookers, affirming the right of Thomas and Morningstar Miller to live and trade in this territory without undue interference. Signed by the territorial governor himself. Thomas felt Morningstar's hand tighten around his arm. This unexpected intervention seemed almost miraculous, and the expression on Harrington's face, as he realized his authority had been undermined, was something Thomas would remember for years to come. The captain's military bearing reasserted itself as he folded the document with precise movements. "Very well," he said stiffly. "The governor's authority is, of course, paramount." He handed the paper back to the judge, then turned to his men. "We're leaving." But before departing, Harrington approached Thomas once more. In the process of turning, his cavalry badge, the symbol of his authority, caught on his uniform and fell to the ground between them. Neither man moved to retrieve it immediately. "This isn't over, Miller," he said quietly. "Governors come and go. Policies change. The territory is changing, whether you and your savage friends accept it or not." Thomas met his gaze steadily. "Perhaps it is changing, Captain. Just not in the way you imagine." After a moment of tense silence, Thomas bent down and picked up the captain's badge, holding it out to him. "You drop this," he said simply, the gesture returning the symbol of authority rather than trampling. It was not lost on those watching. It demonstrated a respect for legitimate authority that Harrington himself had failed to show. The captain snatched the badge without acknowledgment and returned to his men. Within minutes, they had mounted and ridden away, leaving a cloud of dust and lingering tension in their wake. As the threat receded, the united front that had formed so unexpectedly began to dissolve into its component parts. Apache families gathered together, speaking quietly in their language. Settler guests stood in small clusters, processing what they had witnessed. Yet something had shifted. The lines separating these groups seemed less rigid than before. Judge Ellsworth approached Thomas and Morningstar, his severe expression softening somewhat. "The governor is an old friend," he explained. "When he told me about your unique situation, I was intrigued. When his aide reported Harrington's movements after the ceremony, I became concerned." "We're grateful for your intervention, Your Honor," Thomas said sincerely. The judge nodded. "Governor Davis believes this territory's future depends on finding ways for all its peoples to coexist. He sees your marriage as a symbol of that possibility." His gaze moved to the scattered pieces of the peace pipe. Though clearly, not everyone shares that vision. White Hawk joined them, his dignified presence commanding respect even from the judge. "In our stories," the elder said, "we learned that the path of peace is never straight or easy. Today, we walked a difficult section of that path together." He looked pointedly at the settler families who had stood with the Apache against Harrington. "All of us?" Dr. Wilson, ever practical, called for the celebration to continue. "Best response to bullies," he declared, "is to refuse them the power to ruin a perfectly good wedding feast." Gradually, the music resumed and conversations rekindled, though with a more subdued quality. Thomas and Morningstar moved among their guests, offering reassurances and thanks. Running Fox stayed close to them, his young face still showing traces of the fear he had experienced. "You were very brave," Thomas told him quietly, "but also very reckless. The fire could have spread." "I did not know what else to do," the boy admitted. "He was going to hurt you." Morningstar knelt beside her son. "Your heart was protecting your family," she said gently. "But remember what your father taught you. Courage must be guided by wisdom." As the night deepened and guests gradually departed, Thomas found himself standing with Morningstar at the edge of the gathering, watching the last of the celebration. Despite Harrington's interruption, or perhaps because of how it had been resolved, there was a sense of triumph in the air, a feeling that something significant had been accomplished beyond just their marriage. Today, we have seen both the worst and best of people, Morning Star observed, leaning against his shoulder. Thomas nodded, thinking of the unlikely alliance that had formed in their defense. Bridges are being built, just as White Hawk said. He looked down at her, and we're standing on the strongest one of all. Spring blossomed into summer, and the trading post gradually transformed under the influence of its new family. Morning Star added touches that bridged both worlds. Apache weavings hung alongside settler tools, medicinal herbs dried from ceiling beams, and running fox's toys mingled with inventory in unlikely corners. The boy had adapted to his new life, with the resilience of childhood, proudly helping Thomas with the trading post and accompanying Morning Star when she gathered plants in the desert. Each evening, they continued their reading lessons, with Running Fox now able to sound out simple sentences from Thomas's books. One afternoon, Thomas discovered a drawing the boy had made 3 figures standing together before a simple house, the sun shining brightly above them. "My family," Running Fox explained when asked, the simple phrase containing volumes of meaning. The territorial governor's intervention had indeed provided protection against Harrington's immediate threats, but larger changes still loomed. The plans to relocate the Apache continued, though with modifications. Rather than a distant reservation, White Hawk had negotiated for land adjacent to their current territory, still a painful reduction of their ancestral holdings, but one that would allow them to maintain connections to sacred sites and familiar hunting grounds. The governor listened. White Hawk told Thomas during one of their now regular conversations, "Not to everything, but enough. Your marriage opened a small door." Thomas's trading post had become a different kind of crossroads, not merely a place of commerce, but a neutral ground where Apache and settlers could interact with reduced tension. Morning Star's knowledge of medicinal plants had gained her reluctant respect even from settler women, who initially shunned her. Several had sought her help when conventional medicines failed their ailing children. The small one with red hair, Morning Star told Thomas one evening, she had the coughing sickness. Her mother brought her today, though she would not look me in the eyes. Still, she thanked me when the child's breathing eased. Thomas smiled. Small steps. Yes, Morning Star agreed, like Running Fox learning his letters. One mark at a time, but one day a whole book. Their personal adjustment to married life had its own challenges and joys. Morning Star maintained many Apache traditions while adapting to aspects of Thomas's world. Thomas continued learning Apache ways, participating in ceremonies when invited and respecting practices he might not fully understand. Some nights they spoke of deeper concerns, whether Running Fox would face prejudice as he grew older, how they would navigate the inevitable conflicts between their cultures, what would happen if government policies shifted again. But these conversations always ended with renewed commitment to the path they had chosen together. News came in early fall that Captain Harrington had been reassigned to a fort in Dakota Territory, a lateral move at best, likely influenced by the governor's quiet intervention. The more immediate military presence was now commanded by a younger lieutenant who, while not particularly sympathetic to the Apache, at least approached his duties with professionalism rather than prejudice. Thomas received an unexpected letter from the territorial capital, an offer to serve as an informal liaison between the government and the Apache community during the coming transition. The position would provide modest compensation, but more importantly, a voice in decisions that would affect both his wife's people and the future of settler-native relations in the region. "They recognize what you have built here," Dr. Wilson observed when Thomas shared the news. "A man with feet in both worlds has value to those wise enough to see it." The most significant change came on a crisp autumn morning when Morning Star approached Thomas with uncharacteristic hesitancy. They had been married nearly 6 months, finding their rhythm as a family and weathering the occasional storm of community disapproval. I have something to tell you, she said, her expression a mixture of joy and uncertainty. Thomas looked up from the inventory he was recording. What is it? Morning Star took his hand and placed it gently against her abdomen. New life grows here, she said simply. Our child. Thomas stood motionless for a moment, overwhelmed by emotions he hadn't expected to feel again, the profound wonder of impending fatherhood, renewed after he had thought that door forever closed. Are you certain? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, watching his reaction carefully. The signs are clear. By spring planting, we will have a new voice in our home. Thomas pulled her into an embrace, mindful of her condition even in his excitement. Running Fox will be overjoyed to be a big brother. Yes, she agreed, her smile radiant. He already speaks to the spirits, asking for a sister. That evening, they shared the news with Running Fox, who received it with solemn excitement immediately, offering his wooden eagle carving as a gift for the baby. Father made it to protect me, he explained. Now it will protect my sister. Or brother, Thomas gently corrected. Running Fox shook his head with the absolute certainty of childhood. Sister, he insisted. I asked for a sister, and the eagle spirit heard me. As twilight painted the desert in purple and gold, the three of them, soon to be four, stood outside their home. The trading post sign now read, Miller and Family, a small but significant declaration of their shared identity. In the distance, the Apache settlement prepared for evening, smoke rising from cooking fires. Beyond that, the small settler town glowed with early lamplight. Two worlds, not yet fully reconciled, but no longer entirely separate. And between them, a family that embodied both the challenges and possibilities of the changing territory. When I came to you at the trading post that first day, Running Fox said suddenly, I did not know what would happen. I just knew we were lonely. And now? Thomas asked, his arm around the boy's shoulders. Running Fox looked up at him, then at his mother, his young face alight with the simple wisdom of a child who had helped bridge two worlds with a single heartfelt request. Now we are not lonely, he said. We are family. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Thomas Miller, once a grieving widower, seeking only escape from his past, stood with his Apache wife and son, facing a future none of them could have imagined alone. Whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together, their lives intertwined like the intricate patterns of morning stars beadwork distinct threads, creating something stronger and more beautiful than any could be separately. And somewhere, Thomas thought, Carolyn and Swift Hawk were looking down with approval at the family their loved ones had created, a living bridge between worlds that had been too long divided.